There's a bill you're already paying that never shows up in your inbox, never arrives in the mail, and never gets itemized on your monthly statements. You track your rent, you know your mortgage, you know what you spend on subscriptions, food, gas, and maybe even your investment contributions. Some people can tell you exactly how much they paid in taxes last year, down to the dollar. But there is one cost in your life that quietly grows larger every single year, regardless of whether you acknowledge it or not. A cost that compounds silently in the background of your life. And unlike most bills, this one is impossible to refinance, impossible to negotiate, and impossible to escape. That cost is your body. Now, before you assume this is about green juice, expensive supplements, or meditation retreats, stay with me for a moment, because what we're going to talk about isn't a wellness lecture. It's a financial reality, a mathematical model that almost nobody includes in their financial planning. And yet it has the power to drain more money, more time, and more quality of life than almost any financial mistake you could make. I call it the biological tax. And the reason it's so dangerous is because it hides itself for decades before finally collecting. When you're young, your body feels almost indestructible. You can stay up late, survive on poor sleep, eat whatever is convenient, push through stress, and still wake up the next morning able to function. In your 20s, and often even in your 30s, it feels like your body forgives everything. You skip workouts, sit for hours every day, eat ultra-processed food, run on caffeine and deadlines, and nothing dramatic seems to happen. This creates the illusion that health choices are optional, something you can fix later when life slows down. But what most people don't realize is that your body operates like a financial ledger. Every missed hour of sleep, every chronic stress cycle, every year of inactivity, every decade of poor metabolic habits gets quietly logged. The cost simply doesn't appear immediately. Just like a credit card that lets you spend freely before the bill arrives, your body allows decades of withdrawals before it finally demands repayment. And the cruel trick is that the bill doesn't arrive gradually, it arrives suddenly, often in your 40s or 50s, when the consequences finally reach the surface in the form of a diagnosis, a prescription, a chronic condition, or a procedure you never expected to need. The tab that seemed invisible for years suddenly appears all at once, and by that point, the interest has already compounded. The financial magnitude of this hidden tax is staggering. Research from Fidelity Investments estimates that the average American couple will spend around $315,000 on healthcare during retirement alone. That number surprises people, but what's even more alarming is what it doesn't include. It doesn't include the lost income from years when health problems reduce your productivity. It doesn't include early retirement forced by physical limitations. It doesn't include the emotional and cognitive toll of managing chronic conditions. It doesn't include the opportunities that quietly disappear when your energy and mental clarity decline. When you account for all of those factors, the true cost of poor health easily climbs far beyond that headline number. This is why the biological tax is so destructive. It doesn't just take money, it drains the systems that generate money in the first place. To understand how powerful this hidden cost is, consider three numbers that fundamentally reshape how we should think about health. The first is $1,400. That's roughly what the average American spends each month on healthcare by their mid-60s, when you combine insurance premiums, medications, copays, and out-of-pocket costs. For many retirees, that ends up consuming 35 to 40% of their entire monthly income. Think about that for a moment. After decades of saving, investing, and planning for retirement, nearly half of your income may go simply toward maintaining your physical condition, not toward travel, experiences, or freedom, just toward keeping the biological machine functioning. The second number is 7.8 years. Research published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that the gap in life expectancy between the most physically active individuals and the least active is nearly 8 years. That is almost an entire decade of additional life. But what's more important is the quality of those years. People who maintain physical activity tend to spend those years mobile, independent, and cognitively sharp, while those who remain inactive often spend their later years navigating a complex web of medical limitations. In other words, inactivity doesn't just shorten life, it compresses it into fewer healthy years, followed by a longer period of decline. The third number is $90,000, which represents the approximate cost of private health insurance if someone retires early before age 65 and needs coverage before Medicare eligibility. And that figure appears before a single major medical event occurs. If someone enters early retirement already dealing with high blood pressure, metabolic dysfunction, chronic pain, or sleep disorders, insurers recognize the risk and price accordingly. At that point, you're no longer insuring a healthy asset, you're insuring a deteriorating one. What makes this entire dynamic fascinating is how differently people treat financial investments compared to biological ones. Most people obsess over their financial portfolio. They study index funds, calculate compound returns, track market performance, and debate the optimal savings rate. Yet those same individuals often treat their physical health as an afterthought, something optional that can be addressed later. But if we examine the math honestly, the body is the most important investment platform a person owns. Every dollar you earn, every decision you make, every opportunity you pursue is filtered through your biological operating system. If that system degrades, the performance of everything else degrades with it. To illustrate this, imagine two individuals with identical financial lives. They earn the same income, save the same percentage, and start with similar investment portfolios. We'll call them James and Daniel. James follows the default path most people take. He doesn't intentionally neglect his health, but he doesn't prioritize it either. Work is stressful, sleep is inconsistent, and exercise happens sporadically when he has time. In his 30s and 40s, he spends almost nothing on maintaining his physical health. Daniel, on the other hand, allocates around $300 a month toward maintaining his body. He invests in a gym membership, healthier food, preventative medical tests, and consistent sleep habits. To many people around him, this appears wasteful. They tell him he could be investing that money in the stock market instead. Now, fast forward 30 years. James reaches his early 60s after experiencing a cardiac event that forces him to scale back work earlier than planned. He now takes several medications daily, his healthcare costs exceed $1,800 per month, and his retirement portfolio begins draining faster than projected because the original financial plan never accounted for serious health problems arriving in his late 50s. Daniel, meanwhile, arrives at the same age with strong energy, cognitive clarity, and physical mobility. His healthcare expenses remain relatively low. He continues working by choice rather than necessity, and his investment portfolio continues compounding. On paper, Daniel's $300 monthly health investment might have grown to roughly $340,000 if it had been invested in the market instead. But in reality, he didn't lose that money. He converted it into the single asset that allows every other asset in his life to function effectively. His body became the infrastructure supporting his financial freedom. In that context, the $300 wasn't an expense at all. It was insurance against the biological tax. One of the earliest warning signs that someone has already begun paying this tax is subtle and easy to ignore. Income grows, but energy declines. Professional success increases, but exhaustion becomes more common. Concentration weakens, recovery takes longer, and weekends feel insufficient to restore the energy lost during the work week. Many people interpret this shift as normal aging, but in reality, it's often the early signal that the biological ledger has begun collecting its payments. For individuals whose income depends on decision making, creativity, leadership, or entrepreneurial energy, operating at even 70% capacity can carry enormous financial consequences. The biological tax isn't always visible in hospital bills. Sometimes it appears as missed opportunities, slower thinking, reduced motivation, or strained relationships caused by chronic fatigue. In many cases, the most expensive cost is not medical treatment, but the quiet loss of the life someone could have experienced if their energy and vitality had remained intact. This is why prevention has such extraordinary financial leverage. A relatively inexpensive annual blood panel that identifies early metabolic issues can prevent decades of treatment and complications later. A consistent sleep schedule can preserve cognitive performance that directly impacts career advancement and decision quality. Regular movement preserves mobility and independence, preventing the cascade of health problems that often follow long periods of inactivity. In purely financial terms, these actions produce returns that rival or exceed almost any traditional investment. Yet culturally, we treat them as optional luxuries rather than foundational infrastructure. Society has built an enormous ecosystem around optimizing money. Podcasts, financial advisors, investing apps, spreadsheets, and endless discussions about market strategies. Meanwhile, the biological foundation that enables all financial success often receives far less attention. People will spend hours comparing investment fees that differ by fractions of a percent, while sacrificing sleep, ignoring stress, and living in a state of chronic exhaustion. The biological tax operates independently of these financial discussions. It doesn't pause because you're busy building a career. It doesn't reward discipline in one area with exemption in another. It simply runs its own ledger in parallel with your financial one. The individuals who recognize this early treat their health the same way they treat long-term investments. They see sleep as a non-negotiable asset rather than a negotiable luxury. They treat physical movement the way investors treat regular contributions to a retirement account, small, consistent deposits that compound over time. They understand that money spent protecting their biological system is not indulgence, but infrastructure, because eventually everyone reaches the same stage of life, retirement. On average, people spend about 18 years in that phase. The central question isn't just whether the financial resources will exist to support those years. The deeper question is what kind of body will be present to experience them. In the end, wealth is only as valuable as the biological system capable of enjoying it. A retirement filled with medical appointments, physical limitations, and chronic fatigue is fundamentally different from one filled with mobility, curiosity, and energy. And the most important factor determining which version someone experiences isn't luck or genetics alone. It's the quiet accumulation of daily decisions made decades earlier when the consequences still seemed distant. The truth is simple, but uncomfortable. Your body is not just part of your life, it is the platform that makes your life possible. Every investment you make, every career move you pursue, every relationship you build ultimately runs on that platform. Ignore it long enough, and the biological tax will eventually arrive, collecting payments in ways that money alone cannot fix. But recognize its existence early enough, and you gain the rare advantage of controlling the most powerful investment you will ever own. Your body is not merely an expense to maintain, it is the most valuable asset you possess. The sooner you start treating it like one, the greater the return you will experience in every other part of your life. If this perspective changed how you think about health and wealth, consider subscribing. Most financial conversations focus on markets, investments, and income strategies, but some of the most important financial decisions are the ones that never appear on a balance sheet until it's too late. And before you go, think about this question. What is one small investment you could start making today that your future body and your future finances will thank you for?